Welcome to another deep dive.
Okay, so you've sent over some really fascinating stuff on Claudia Sheinbaum's first weeks as president of Mexico.
It's been a really interesting start.
Yeah, and we're talking about that recent address she gave, I
Hmm.
think education reform, those constitutional clashes, even the aftermath of Hurricane Otis.
Yeah, there's a lot to
It's
unpack.
a lot.
So
And let's get to it.
let's get to it. What's really interesting here is how President Sheinbaum is establishing her leadership style so early on, right?
Yeah, and I think this address wasn't just about policy. It was about connecting directly with the Mexican people.
It felt very much like she's setting the stage for what could be a very transformative 6 years.
Yeah. It sounds like she's not wasting any time. From what I gathered, the atmosphere was electric. Journalists, local officials, everyone crammed into the room, eager to hear from Mexico's first female president. And then, get this, a surprise musical performance. Talk about making an entrance.
Yeah, I mean, it was a savvy move for sure, because the issues that she tackled, were weighty judicial reform, economic forecast, Hurricane Otis. But that undercurrent of optimism, the celebratory vibe, it's as if she's saying, look, we're here, we're in charge, and we're not backing down.
Especially when it comes to education. This Rita Cetina Universal Basic Education Grant is huge. It's not just about providing financial support for students, it's a direct link to a powerful legacy.
Exactly, and I think it's really significant that she's chosen to name this grant after Rita Cetina Gutierrez, who, as you know, is this 19th century pioneer for women's education, someone who really challenged the norms of her time.
Yeah.
So by invoking Cetina's name, President Sheinbaum is sending a very clear message, I think, about her own commitment to social progress.
And maybe even shoring up support among specific groups too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Women, educators, those who see this as a victory for social justice.
Of course, it could also alienate those who are wary of such change.
Of course, yeah. There's two sides to every coin, as they say.
It's a bold move, no question.
Hmm.
And the details are really fascinating. A base amount for families, plus more for each child enrolled. It seems to recognize just how tough things are financially for a lot of families.
Yeah, it's a targeted approach, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run, especially alongside some of her other ambitious plans.
Well, speaking of bold moves, let's talk about judicial reform. Sheinbaum wants judges, even Supreme Court justices, to be elected by the people. Now, you can imagine that didn't go over well with the Supreme Court, right?
No, not at all. I mean, there's definitely some tension brewing there.
Yeah.
Sheinbaum claims their attempt to review the reform's constitutionality is completely out of line.
Wow.
She's citing Articles 39 and 135 of the Mexican Constitution, which, by the way, deal with popular sovereignty and the process of amending the Constitution, respectively. So basically, she's arguing that because her coalition has a supermajority in Congress and because these reforms were approved by most state legislatures, the Supreme Court has no grounds to intervene.
So it's a power struggle, with Sheinbaum appealing directly to the people, underlining their role in shaping Mexico's future.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But on the economic front,
Mm-hmm.
things sound a bit more optimistic. Or am I reading that wrong?
To a degree. To
Yeah.
a degree. Sheinbaum presented a fairly rosy outlook, pointing to the strong peso and plans to tackle the deficit.
Okay.
But I think the real question mark hangs over those massive infrastructure projects, the Guaymas-Chihuahua Highway, the Nogales train route, that Tamaulipas port development.
Right.
These are huge undertakings, and some people are understandably skeptical about their feasibility, particularly from a financial perspective.
Right, and you've got to wonder how Hurricane Otis factors into all of this. The reports from Acapulco are just heartbreaking. The Savannah River overflowing, thousands of people displaced, essential services down. Could this derail some of those grand plans, or at least force a reallocation of resources?
It's certainly a significant challenge, there's no doubt about it. Rebuilding after a disaster of this magnitude will require a huge amount of time, money, and manpower. The question is, can Sheinbaum's government juggle these immediate needs with their long-term vision for economic growth and development?
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough situation all around. And it makes you realize that while we're here talking about big picture politics and economics, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected by these events.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really puts things in perspective when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
And speaking of real people, Sheinbaum's approach to migration is particularly interesting. She's aiming for this more humanitarian approach.
Right.
Streamlining work permits, making consular services more accessible, ensuring that repatriation is done respectfully, with dignity.
Yeah, it's a departure from the more hardline policies we've seen in the past, that's for sure.
You sure?
But as you mentioned earlier, this isn't just Mexico's problem to solve. So how does this new approach play into the whole U.S.-Mexico relationship, especially with all the complexities of the border situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a delicate balancing act, right? Scheinbaum seems to be acknowledging the shared responsibility here, suggesting that both countries need to work together on solutions that benefit everyone involved. It's about addressing the root causes of migration, not just reacting to the symptoms, which is something that we've heard before.
Which makes a lot of sense,
Mm.
especially when you consider the human cost, right?
Exactly.
But shifting gears a bit, there was something else from Scheinbaum's address that really struck me, that whole housewife comment. You know how some journalists were using that term in a derogatory way when talking about her?
Yeah, I noticed that too, yeah. It was a subtle but pointed jab at the sexism that still very much exists, even at the highest levels of government, right?
Oh, for sure.
Oh,
But instead of just brushing it off, it's almost like she used it as an opportunity to highlight the often invisible labor of so many women.
yep.
She talked about the demands of childcare, cooking, cleaning, keeping a household running, often on top of a paid job.
Right, right.
It was brilliant.
It was a masterclass, I think, in reframing the narrative, you know? She's taking back the term housewife, emphasizing its value and the essential role these women play in society. It's like she's calling out the sexism while simultaneously elevating the contributions of millions.
And then she tied it directly to her administration's policies, too.
Exactly.
Things like those new pensions for grandmothers who care for their grandchildren.
Right.
It's like she's saying, we see you, we value you, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is, you know?
Absolutely. A powerful statement, especially coming from the first female president. And speaking of historical firsts, you know that article you shared about the 1824 Constitution celebrating its 200th anniversary really caught my eye.
Oh, right. And Sheinbaum brought that up in her address, too, didn't she?
She did, yeah.
I'm guessing it's not a coincidence.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I mean, the 1824 Constitution marked Mexico's emergence as a republic, you know, a definitive break from its colonial past. By highlighting this anniversary, Scheinbaum is drawing this parallel between those early revolutionaries fighting for independence and her own vision for a new era.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's like she's placing herself within that lineage, suggesting that her push for reform is part of a long tradition of the Mexican people shaping their own destiny.
Okay, so she's crafting a very deliberate narrative then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. It's a powerful narrative.
Yeah.
Though I imagine some might argue she's oversimplifying a complex history.
There's always that risk, I think, when you start invoking the past, you know? But what's clear is that Mexico has always grappled with this tension between central authority and regional autonomy.
Okay.
And that very tension is playing out right now in her standoff with the Supreme Court, right?
Oh, wow. It's like history repeating itself, just on a different stage with different players. How fascinating. And, you know, it makes me think about those infrastructure plans again. Such massive projects are bound to face pushback, not just on a financial level, but also politically, right?
Absolutely.
Could this clash between federal and regional interests end up hindering Scheinbaum's vision? What do you think?
It's certainly a possibility, I think. I mean, those tensions are deeply ingrained in Mexican society and politics.
Right.
And the sheer scale of these projects, the potential economic benefits, the environmental impacts, the displacement of communities, it's bound to generate controversy.
She's walking a tightrope, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how she navigates these competing interests, especially as she tries to deliver on her promises of transparency and accountability. Which is something we haven't really touched on, but yeah.
Yeah, well, transparency will be key. That much is certain, you know. Sheinbaum has staked her reputation on a more open and accountable government. But the success of these projects, and indeed the success of her entire agenda, may hinge on her ability to convince the Mexican people that she's working in their best interests, even when those interests clash.
It sounds like a pretty daunting task.
It is, it is. But we're talking about a leader who's already shown a remarkable ability to connect with people, to capture their imagination, and to mobilize support for her vision. So you never know, right?
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah. She's bold, she's charismatic, and she clearly understands the power of symbolism and storytelling.
Absolutely.
Whether she can translate those qualities into tangible progress, into a brighter future for all Mexicans, well, that's the question that will define her legacy.
It certainly will, and I have a feeling we'll be watching, analyzing, and discussing every twist and turn along the way.
It's going to be quite a ride. And you know what else struck me about that whole press conference? Those journalists weren't shying away from tough questions,
No, not at all.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it was refreshing to see, wasn't it? I mean, they brought up some very real concerns,
Yeah.
the rising cost of living, access to health care, even, their own safety.
Right, because we can't gloss over the very real dangers journalists face in Mexico. So, raising those questions about impunity, demanding accountability that took guts.
Oh, absolutely. And, to her credit, President Sheinbaum didn't shy away from the issue either. She vowed to review unresolved cases, to work with authorities to ensure justice is served. Now, whether that actually translates into concrete action, I mean, that remains to be seen. But just the fact that she acknowledged the issue publicly on such a prominent platform, I think speaks
Yeah,
volumes.
it really does. It's a good reminder that behind those grand narratives, those sweeping policy changes, there are countless individual stories, right? We're talking about families in Acapulco picking up the pieces after Hurricane Otis, migrants risking everything for a better life.
Right.
Their struggles, their hopes, those are the human stakes of this new era.
They are. And it brings us back to that question we've been sort of circling around this whole time about whether Scheinbaum's more humane approach to migration can truly take root.
Yeah.
I mean, streamlining work permits, expanding consular services, these are all good things, right? These are all steps in the right direction. But as we've discussed, the situation on the ground is just incredibly complex with pressures coming from all sides, both domestically and from the U.S.
Yeah, it's true. It requires more than just good intentions, doesn't it? It requires navigating a political minefield, balancing competing interests, and finding a way to uphold human rights while also addressing legitimate security concerns. It's a tall order, to say the least.
It is a tall order. It's a story that's still being written. I mean, we're at the very beginning of it. But I think what we've seen in these first few weeks offers a fascinating glimpse into the mind of a leader who's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, no, I agree. She's bold, she's charismatic, and she clearly understands the power of symbolism and storytelling. But whether she can translate those qualities into tangible progress, into a brighter future for all Mexicans, well, I mean, that's the question that will define her legacy.
It will. It really will. And I, for one, will be watching closely. I have a feeling we're going to be analyzing, discussing every twist and turn along the way. This is just the beginning, right?
It's going to be quite a ride, I have a feeling. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into Mexico's new era for now.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for joining me on this journey. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those sources coming.